This is the 19th season of Bass Talk Live. BTL is presented by Bass Cat Boats, Strike King Lures, AFTCO, Pro Guide Batteries, Exxon Lures, Shoreline Boat and RV Repair, Spro, Gamakatsu, Big Bite Baits, The Bass Tank, Denali Rods, Beatdown Outdoors, and Sunline.
BTL coming at you.
Good morning and welcome to another exciting edition of BTL Bass Talk Live, where we are going to talk about bass fishing. Recorded show today. Been live for over a month now. Back to recorded shows. I am at the gauntlet of the Bassmaster Open EQ schedule right now. I'm currently at Watts Bar, the juggernaut that is Watts Bar in Tennessee. I'm sure I'm furiously looking for 15 inchers. Hopefully I'm on them. But we got a good show today. One of my favorite guests for the show, you know him from the Deep Dive app, from Fish the Moment, and from Bassmaster Casting Kids fame. It's none other than the one and only Jonny Schultz. Jonny, thanks for jumping on BTL for, we're actually going to take a deep dive today into a number of different topics that I'm very excited to get into.
For sure, Matt. Thanks for having me on.
You ever fished Watts Bar before?
I have not. I've heard that it's pretty good.
You've heard that Watts Bar is pretty good? So we're recording this is on the 5th. So I don't start practice till Saturday. But everything that I've heard of the stats are that this thing is one of the stingiest late summer fisheries in the country.
So I don't know. I maybe mixed reviews. I haven't fished over there. I just have heard that as some of the other TVA lakes are getting pressured and the whole Asian carp situation and everything, Watts Bar is like maybe a hidden gem. Maybe I've been misinformed, but that's at least what I've heard.
Hidden gem? I have not heard that phrase to describe it yet.
I mean, hey, I think it's all about having some optimism, Matt, going to the tournament. If you think it's a hidden
I'm optimistic.
Gem, and, you don't really get wrapped in the dock talk. You think you can catch 20 pounds. Maybe you can manifest it, catch 20 pounds. That's maybe the way to think about it. So
the pattern is manifestation.
Yeah, that's how I always do it on the lake, Matt. You just got to make the fish be there.
I gotcha. We got a lot to talk about on today's show. There's like 3 or 4 main topics that I want to get into, and we're going to kind of take a deep dive in all of them. We'll do a quick overview. You got some really cool stuff with the Deep Dive app that's coming out that's never before been seen, that you're actually going to debut a working prototype. And I'm looking at this, seeing all sorts of opportunities on BTL today. Yep. We're going to talk about you were ahead of this trend, this tackle trend. You were ahead of the curve on this. You were talking about this before Jacob Wheeler did what he did in the MLF on Gunnersville with the hover rig, the Demiki hover, strolling for largemouth over brush piles. I remember you called me one time just jacked out of your gourd about what you did at Grand Lake with this stuff. And we're going to dive into that. That's right. That timeline is correct, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And then we're going to talk a little bit about finding pelagic fish during the fall, which kind of leads into your offshore fishing playbook version 2, which also will be debuted on BTL. Does that sound like we could cover an hour in that, Jonny?
For sure. Maybe a couple, but I'll try to keep it short on all that stuff.
All right, let's start out with the strolling deal, because this was, now that the season is wrapped up, the only thing really that's left on the schedule, there's a couple NPFLs left on the schedule, as well as a Toyota Series Championship. Would not be surprised if some of those are won or contending for the win using this Demiki strolling technique. But when you were on BTL way earlier this year and talked about it, and then even last year talking with me about it, you and Matt Steffen with Core Tackle have the hover rig hook that's been, how long has that been out now? Has that been out a year already?
Not quite. We came out with it in February, but honestly, we had like prototypes and all that stuff starting last July. So, I mean, we've been working on this for a long time. So it's been a year. We've had the prototypes and had the product in our hand for over a year now.
I have not unlocked this. To me, this technique is like the biffle bug was like 6-7 years ago for me. I knew guys were catching them on it. I've got them in the boat. I fished them in areas they should work. I have not been able to figure it out. You have, though.
So I have, so that kind of gets into my whole like system that I wanted to talk about later in the video. Maybe we can jump into it now, honestly.
Yeah, can we combine two of them?
Let's do that. So like, okay,
Okay.
so let me lay it out for you, Matt. So basically from 2011, basically through 2021, I fished pretty much the same system and the same style for offshore fishing, literally 10 years straight. And I was actually kind of a late adopter to the live scope game. I didn't get it on my boat right away. I had, John Sokup over when he was at the Bass Tank telling me, got to get live scope. And I was still catching offshore fish, my old school. I mean, honestly, up until 2021, I had a 8-year-old Humminbird Onyx unit and a 12-year-old Humminbird 998 with 2D sonar only. That was what I was running.
998. That's like the OG.
OG. So that's the two graphs I was running. I was making all my YouTube videos, offshore fishing, all that stuff without live scope. So my system, and I made this thing called the Offshore Fishing Playbook, which is a digital guide I sell on my website. And I've sold, a lot of copies of that. But basically the idea behind it is that I would, if I had to summarize it in like 30 seconds, I would find areas that had either cover, bait fish, or fish. And then you'd have two of those three variables present. So bait fish and cover, bait fish and fish, or fish and cover. So if you could find a combination of those three elements, then you fished as many of those types of areas as possible in a given fishing day, spending no more than 10 minutes on each spot. You give yourself a very good chance of catching fish. And it's kind of this probabilistic model. Well, the idea would be if you can spend 10 minutes per spot, 60 minutes in an hour, so you can fish 6 spots per hour. You have 8 hours of fishing. You can fish about 50 spots in a day. And with these offshore areas, if you could fish, these 50 spots or, however many that is, close to 50 spots in a day, you only needed 2 or 3 of those spots usually to pay off, because a lot of times you're fishing offshore, you'll catch 2-3 fish per spot. And that's how I made my system work. And I would just graph till I found a spot with those 2 of those 3 elements. I'd make 5-6 casts on it and I move on. And it worked for me through my college fishing days when I was fishing in high school fishing. I developed it kind of on my own, and I was pretty confident it was pretty good. But I didn't really know how good it was until I started watching Brian Thrift dominate.
That's exactly what I thought in my head. I was like, dude, you just described Thrift's pattern.
It's Thrift's pattern. And it's one of those things where when I'm graph offshore, I don't care about whether I'm fishing a giant brush pile, a small brush pile, a stump. As long as it's a piece of cover, it could be literally the size of a bucket. But like any piece of cover with bait or fish around it, or vice versa or whatever, I'm going to fish it. And Thrift had a streak where he had 70 limits in a row, 70 competition fishing days in a row. That's called a limit of bass. Insane. It's out of this world. And that's how he was fishing. And I was like always following Thrift because I was like, man, his fishing style is like exactly what I do. And that style worked all the way up until about 2021 for me. It still works now. But the problem with that technique in that style is that there's only certain areas of a lake where it will work most of the time. So let's say I'm on Grand Lake in Oklahoma. I might have to cover 15 to 20 miles of a lake to find a 200-yard, maybe a 1-mile zone of the lake where the fish are really aggressive, or they're feeding on active. And it can work. So I'll start by the dam down by Grand Lake, and I'll run all the way up to Honey Creek at sometimes, which is a 20-mile run sometimes, to get up there. And I might only find them in one zone. And I catch all my fish in, like, let's say 30 minutes of the day. I'll hit one little zone, I catch them. That's very difficult to do, especially if it's windy, especially for like an average angler to go out there and do that. And so my system worked really well for me, and it was very consistent for videos, making content, doing what I do. And I'm not fishing tournaments, so I just did it to make my YouTube videos, so I'm consistently making content, for my job. Now that I'm doing it full time. Well, 2021 rolled around, and I got the live scope. And live scope completely changed my perspective on all of this for 2 reasons. One, you could see that there are so many fish in all these areas that are following your bait, getting interested in your bait, and are not biting. Before that, I would know I'm fishing around fish because I graphed them with side imaging, down imaging, things like that. But I wasn't able to tell if the fish were following my bait, how they were reacting to it, all this
So you
stuff.
weren't getting a true picture.
Correct.
You were seeing like you were at the art show, but you're only seeing like a corner of the painting instead of the entire painting.
Exactly. And so I'm rolling up and I'm making my 5 casts. And if that fish is going to bite, he's going to bite. And if he doesn't bite, I've realized over countless hours that like probably not going to make him bite. So I'm like, okay, how can I integrate this live scope deal into my system? And I literally spent from 2021 until like right now trying to integrate live scope in my system. And I can tell you, I've had some great days on the water, but I've had more bad days on the water over the last 2 years than I've had good days because I've been trying to experiment and learn with this live scope. And I've actually feel like overall, if I had stuck to my old system, I would have probably caught more fish and done better overall. But all of those failures have helped me learn a ton about live scope. And now I have a brand new system where I basically have a way that I can integrate live scope. And the thing about it that's cool, Matt, is I don't have to leave a section of the lake anymore. I can just drop myself in one section of a lake, use this system, and I can catch fish in any section of the lake, any time of the year. And I don't have to move around. It works just where I'm at.
So if you want to fish drowning, you could stay in drowning. If you want to fish a duck, you could stay in duck. If you want to fish honey, you can stay in honey. Now you're maximizing your productive time on the water.
And it wasn't possible before with my old system. Now, I'm a big numbers guy, so I log all my fish catches. I log all of what I'm doing, so I know where I'm going, what I'm doing. So I look at the data of it. And again, it's for me, fishing is like probability. So I'm trying to increase my odds of catching fish using probability as much as possible. That's my style. And it's just for me, it just helps me catch as many fish as possible for videos. Because that's, again, if I go out for a day and don't catch fish for a video, it's a waste of day for me. Just like if you go try to sell something and you're a salesperson, you don't sell a car or whatever, it's a bad day. So you have to, make it work. So
I thought Brian Thrift called this the CPS, cigarettes per spot. I thought he was a cigarette per spot, and then that's how he figured out when it was time to move. When that one was done, it was time to go hit the next little piece of brush.
Dude, seriously, I would set an alarm on my phone for 10 minutes. And when I was learning this, I set an alarm for 10 minutes on my phone. When that alarm went off, I reeled my bait up, pulled the trolling motor, and left. And
so is this new version still based around the 3 principles of cover, bait fish, and bass?
It is.
Okay.
So this is how I see it now. So before what I would do is I would say, okay, I'm going to find the area of the lake where my style is working. And I might run all over the lake to make it happen. Well, now I'm focused on trying to get the fish to bite that are in the area. And I know you're a Sooners fan, Matt. Football is big. Yep. I'm sure there's a lot
73 to nothing.
There we go. So I'm not the, deep into football, but I know enough about football, played football in high school. I know enough about what's going on. So I want to give you guys an analogy to football. And even if you're not a big football person on this, I'm not going to go super deep into it.
We do on BTO. We do sports analogies.
Yeah, I can't do bowling. I'm not Jeffries over here, but I'm gonna try the football angle. So okay.
Speaking of which, we now sponsor the SNU bowling team. We're an official BTL is an official sponsor of the SNU bowling team. It's going to be on the website. We are going to be listed as a contributing sponsor to the SNU bowling team. So now all BTL listeners have a rooting interest in collegiate bowling. All right, that's just a little side note.
Can you get the BTL printed on the ball? Does that work, or is that against regulations?
I don't know how that works on the ball.
I'm thinking glow in the dark ball, like that would be great. BTL, like glow in the dark.
I don't know. That might be looked at like a push button in tournament scene.
Oh, that's true. Okay, well.
It might be like the old Zebco 33 on Derby Day.
There we go. Good deal. So okay,
right,
so this is how I think about it. And you're good. So okay, here's how I think about it. So when you get on the football field and you get lined up, quarterback's there, the coach is going to call a play. You look at the defense. What's the defense going to give you? There could be a bunch of different defenses that they could be running, cover 1, cover 2, whatever it is. So in football, let's say you have 4 different options. And there's a lot more options, but you have 4 general options. Let's say you can just straight up run the ball. You can maybe get in shotgun and throw a pass, put 3-4 wide receivers out wide, just go for a pass. Maybe you can do play action where you fake the run, then throw the ball, or you screen. So you let the defenders come in, throw it over the top of them for a screen, get some blocks and you go. So those are like 4 potential genres or categories of plays. Now,
Okay.
within that, there's a million things you can do. You can run sweeps. You could do a bootleg, for the pass. There's a lot of different things you can do within that. But let's just keep those 4 categories. And basically, depending on what you're doing in football, you can rely on maybe one of those 4. Maybe there's 5 or 6. Again, I'm not like a football offensive coordinator or something like that. But let's just, for an example,
like you could be.
For example, you have these 4 options. And you can audible at the line. So, your quarterback, you can audible to a run, you can audible to play action, whatever it is to get yourself in a position to best succeed against the defense.
Yep.
So what I've done is I've developed basically 4 schemes that I can use on the lake. And I've been experimenting with them now, again, for 2 years now, and really hard for the last 8 months. And I've been doing it. I haven't talked really about this much to anybody because I like to figure stuff out first before I just start talking about it.
Yeah.
That's my deal. I like to get the metrics, get the data behind it,
I'm
and
the
then share
opposite,
it.
Johnny. Just the opposite. I just like to talk about it and then go see if what I said made any sense. But that's why you do what you do and I do what I do.
Well, so it's to me, I feel like if you put out wrong information, it sends people down wild goose chase. I'd rather go down the wild goose chase myself and figure it out and then share what I feel like is more accurate. That's
Noted.
my
much more responsible.
Well, also, I feel, I don't know, I feel this obligation if I'm going to share. Maybe that's just me. That's just how I feel about it.
No, that's what you do for your career. I mean, like you said, you listen to previous BTLs, you left a very lucrative job and career in corporate America to do this. So, I mean, you got to do it with the same integrity and passion as you would do a 9 to 5.
For sure. Well, that's how I think about it. So, okay. So I have these 4 categories. I haven't pulled up here just some notes just to make sure I get everything right. So here's my 4 categories, Matt. And these 4 categories you can implement on any section of any lake across the country in any time of the year, and you can get fish to bite. It's a very bold statement, but I feel very confident in that these 4 can be purposed across. Now, each individual play or scheme or whatever I'm going to be talking about here has a lot of nuance to it. There's a lot of variations. There's a lot of other stuff that goes into it. So I'm going to kind of break it down. It's kind of complicated, but that's why I'm making a playbook with it and not just, putting it out here. So my 4 groups are offshore flipping, schools of bass, offshore wolf packs, and isolated bass. So these are working titles that I just put out to refine them when I make the playbook. But these are the 4 groups. So let me explain what these are. So offshore flipping. What is offshore flipping? What I've found for myself, especially since I got live scope, is that a lot of the areas I used to fish, let's say it's brush piles or stumps or whatever, I used to think I have to stay 100 feet away from these fish. I need to bomb a big worm or a football jig, stay away from them, and that's how I'm getting them to bite. The more and more I'm using live scope, the more you can see those fish react to your bait. And I'm realizing that you can get 30 feet away from these brush piles or stumps or whatever and pitch a jig or a worm or a Neko rig or a drop shot. And if those fish want your bait, they're just going to come over and they're just going to hammer it. It doesn't matter if your boat's 30 feet away. And if you think about it, when you're fishing off or up shallow and you're flipping, are you staying 100 feet away from the bank and throwing a jig up to the bank when you're flipping? No, you're literally getting within 20, 30 feet of those areas and just flipping your bait. And those fish are still eating. You don't need to be that far away from them. So what I've realized is that I can be a lot more efficient by getting closer to these areas. And basically what I'm doing is graphing and finding stumps, brush piles, rock piles, laydowns, whatever things are there, graphing them with side imaging, marking all the areas that have either fish or bait around them. So if I can find a piece of cover that either has fish or bait around it, I mark it. I go to that area and I pick up a variety of baits depending on the year. If it's wintertime, I'm throwing either a Damiki rig, jerkbait, Alabama rig. If it's pre-spawn time, I might be throwing a big spinner bait. You can throw squirrel crankbait, deep dive crankbaits, whatever, Carolina rig. Spawn, Carolina rig, wacky worms, whatever it is, so on and so forth. And you have different baits you can throw that work better in different situations. But I'm not getting super far from these objects. I'm working it and I'm thinking about it, okay, I'm Tommy Biffle up a creek or Denny Brower up a creek, 1995 Bassmaster Classics. And I am flipping, but I'm doing it offshore and I'm scanning first with side imaging, marking this stuff, and then going through with the live scope, pitching to these objects. And I'm catching a ton of good fish doing that. And that is my first option. Now, does this always work? No, it does not always work. And it's not always the best way to catch the biggest fish in the lake. But usually this is one of the 4 options that does work. work. So I will experiment with this, let's say for 20, 30 minutes when I first get to the lake, graph down a flat or an area, mark 10 pieces of cover. I'll fish all 10 of them super fast and make 3 casts per object. And if I catch 2 fish, boom, I'm going to start doing it. If I get 0 bites, I'm done. I'm not going to do that. And I'm going to move on to another option. So that's option 1. What do you
That's amazing. I was just thinking, I can't remember, aside from like jerk bait, which I might cast 50 or 60 feet out to get it down. I've done a lot of offshore fishing on brush piles this year. I cannot think of a time that I did a legit, honest overhand cast. Like that is a dying thing. Everything is this. Everything's a pitch, a little roll cast, a flip to it, accurate, putting it to a fish in the brush or to the edge of the brush to draw a fish back, or a short cast to get the jerkbait down over the brush. You're right. The casting aspect is it's flipping and pitching.
It's offshore flipping.
It's all like this. I mean, with my spinning rod, I'm throwing a drop shot and I'm doing this.
Yep. So, and that's something that Brian Thrift is doing and Paul and Nick were doing with 360 imaging. That's why they're always saying 360 is a must for their boat. They were doing the same thing with 360. I was doing the same thing with waypoints back in the day. So it's not like it's new. This is not new, but with live scope, you can be a little bit more efficient with it because you can just see the fish at the brush and you can say, oh, that fish is swimming around in the back half of the brush. I need to pitch that thing 50 feet. It lands right in front of the fish's face. You watch it eat the bait and catch it, Okay, so that's option 1. And option 2 is going to be traditional offshore schools of bass. So this is Tennessee River ledge fishing, big schools of fish. In this situation, I found, what's up?
Dots
on the screen, dotted up. You see them on side imaging, see them all over. Those grains of rice on the side scan. You see them all over there. Good to go. These fish are still caught, in my opinion, best with the traditional method, which is to stay 70, 80, 100 feet away from them, bomb your casts at them, stay away the best you can, hit the timing right, whether the current is flowing, whether you need the wind, it's the sun, whatever it is. This is stuff that KVD's been doing 2007, 2008, Kentucky Lake, Pickwick, Wheeler, Decatur Flats. Like this is old school ledge fishing, schools of fish, and it still works. The thing is that these schools of fish are getting tougher to catch, in my opinion, and they're getting hit by more anglers because they're just so much easier to find with all the electronics. So I would say that this accounts for less than 20% of the fish that I catch offshore nowadays are these schools of fish, but you can still get them to bite like Wheeler is doing with the Demiki rig over the top of them on the Tennessee River. You can employ some different tactics and things to make them bite. But really with these offshore schools of fish, you don't necessarily need the live scope to make this work because the school is just sitting where it's sitting. You just need to stay away from them, hit the timing right, pick the right bait. And this really hasn't changed since, in the past 15 years. It's the same as it's been 15, 20 years. It's just making it's a little bit trickier to get these fish to bite due to pressure. So that's play number 2.
Okay.
Play number 3 is offshore wolf packs on bait fish. So this is your traditional, like when you were on Rayburn, you're out there in the middle and you're watching fish go underneath the balls of bait fish and they're 3 or 4 fish wolf packing underneath them, catch them.
Eye of the tiger.
Exactly. You see them going and they bust through and there's a big hole in the shad. You throw your bait in there and you catch them.
Yep.
And that's something the guys been doing now with live scope for years. I say years, like 3, 4, 5 years now. That's a pretty common way of catching fish. It's not always effective because normally you're going to either find fish that are wolf packed up in like little ones, or you're going to find ones that are big ones. Sometimes you can find big ones mixed with the little ones, but like, let's say, in these first 3 plays, you might find that those offshore flipping fish are not working. These schools of fish are all small, but for whatever reason, those offshore wolf packs that have all the 5 to 7 pounders are out there offshore wolf packing, and you can catch those fish. But you may also have only small ones out there, and all the bigger ones are set up in a school, or the bigger ones are set up around offshore stumps and brush piles. So in a given area, there's probably going to be quality fish somewhere, but they may just be doing one of these 3 out of the 4 things. And this 4th thing is the newest thing, but that's the 3rd thing.
Okay. So so a lot of times also, if those first 2 aren't working, it's because they're offshore chasing bait and they're adjacent to or close to where they would set up as a school, but they're active, they're pulled off, they're taking advantage of the bait that's pushed up, or they're living in that brush pile, but they're going during feeding times, maybe because of current, because of bait fish positioning and wolf packing on these bait fish. So that's your third option. Okay. That makes total sense. This fourth one is, this is the God, I have to use the term. This is the game changer.
The game
Is
changer.
there any other phrase to use other than game changer? This is the
game changer. So this is the one that makes it so that you can stay in one area and catch fish. Without this fourth one, you would still have to run around and find stuff. And that is isolated bass in no man's land. I call it no man's land.
Yeah. This is the one that drives the traditionalists up a wall.
Yes. So this is fishing for one fish, and you're just finding that one fish. You go to the flattest banks or you go over the middle of the creek channel. And these fish are not chasing bait. They're not grouped up in wolf packs of 4 to 5, 6 fish.
They're neutral.
It's one fish just out there by itself. Literally a lone wanderer out there.
And we have no idea why.
No idea why.
But it's out there.
But they're out there. So these fish, this is how I've spent so much time fishing for these fish, Matt, this year. And I've had so many bad days because I've not been able to figure it out. But I finally figured it out of how to get these fish to actually go and what to do and how to kind of do it. It's very hard. It's not easy. But here's what I figured out. Main thing is, one, you're not going to get every single one of these fish to bite. It is not possible. You can try different baits on and everything like that, but maybe it is possible if you have 12 baits you can throw at these fish, but by the time you chase that fish around and move and follow them, it's just not worth it. So what I do is I just pick out one bait, and that's the only bait I throw at these fish. And that's for me going to be the hover rig. That's like my favorite bait if they're suspended 0 to 10 feet from the surface. So I'm going to hover rig them if they're 0 to 10 feet. If they're 10 to 20 feet, I'm going to a traditional Demiki rig. The Demiki rig gets down there a little bit faster, gets to those fish easier. And then if you go 20 plus feet of water, even deeper than that, you can go ice fishing jigs. You can go spoons, things like that.
That's the Cody Huff deal.
Cody Huff deal. You can also catch some of these fish if they're feeding on bigger shad. You can catch them on a big glide bait. If you want to go for bigger fish, a big Magnum flutter spoon, 8-inch flutter spoon if they're feeding on big gizzard shad.
Zaldane.
Zaldane. So like 10 to 20 feet might be a Magnum flutter spoon. 0 to 10 feet might be the big glide bait if they're feeding on 8-inch, 10-inch gizzard shad. So there's some nuance there in baits. But I pick one of those baits based on the scenario. And what I'm doing is I'm trying to throw at as many of these fish as possible. And the way I do this is I have to find an area where a stretch where you might be able to see one fish every 2.5 minutes. Or if it's a good day, one fish every 5 minutes. And what I mean by a good day is if they're biting, and this is like the odds, the probability. This is where I get nerdy about this stuff. But think about this. My goal is to cast on one bass every 5 minutes, let's say. That would be 12 bass every hour that I'd be casting on. And that's 96 bass per day in an 8-hour day. If I can get 1 out of every 10 of those bass to bite, I'm going to have a good day. I'm going to catch my limit. 1 out of every 10, you'll get actually like 10 fish to bite, which is probably what you kind of need from a tournament perspective, especially if you lose a fish or you miss one or whatever. So if you can get 1 out of every 10 of these bass to bite, you need to be casting at a bass every 5 minutes. Now that means you can go 5 minutes between casting at a bass, which happens at times, but you're only literally making 100, maybe 200 casts a day because you're making a couple casts at that fish. And if it commits, it'll come up and it will just shark your bait and eat it. And you might be able to kind of coerce them to bite with like a jerk bait or a hover rig or something like that. And kind of, there's ways you can get them to bite that's like retrieve, bait color, bait size. There's some things in there that are not just, there's some juice, some secret juice in there. It's not all, just cast at them. But that's if you can get 1 in 10. That's a really good day.
That's a phenomenal day.
Let's say that you're more realistic and you get 1 out of every 20 to bite, which means you're casting on 20 bass and you only get 1 out of every 20 bass you cast at to bite. That means you need to be casting at a bass every 2.5 minutes, 2.5 minutes. Every 2.5 minutes, you're casting at a bass if 1 in 20 bite, which is probably more realistic. And this is what I've been doing on Beaver Lake. What I've been doing is I've been getting out on these long gravel points and stuff like that, over the creek channel, all kinds of stuff. I'm taking my hover rig and I'm catching big smallmouth, big spotted bass, big largemouth. And for beaver, these are like 2.5 to 3 pounders, which I know on most
That's a
lakes that's a
tank.
big one. But like
That's
if you
a
can get
that's a
12
big
pounds
one.
on beaver, you're getting a top 5 in any tournament. So what I'm doing is I'm going around and I'm just literally getting on these giant flat points over the creek channel, whatever. And I'm just scoping around. And there's certain areas of the lake, certain sections where you're going to have more fish that are doing it. Some areas have less. And sometimes they're more aggressive, sometimes they're less aggressive. And that's why this is one of the plays. Because usually what I find is that if the offshore flipping isn't working, the schools of bass are not set up, the fish are not chasing on the offshore wolf packs around the bait fish, you can catch these isolated fish on most days as long as you're around enough fish. Now, the thing about these is that all of these are effective at catching fish. Now, are they the best way to catch the biggest bag in every tournament? No. The section of the lake still does matter. So like you might go to one area of the lake and one of these 4 is working and you could catch maximum 18 pounds of fish. Well, maybe in another section of the lake, there's a guy who can catch 22 pounds of fish using one of these 4 techniques.
That happened at Rayburn in the Open.
Yeah.
My buddy Austin Cranford, top 10. He was 20 miles down lake, closer to the dam, and the fish he was scoping on a jerkbait were 2.5 to 5 pounders. I was up by the bridge. The fish I was scoping were 1.5 to 3 pounders. He made the top 10. I finished 35th.
So this
Doing
is
the same thing.
And so this is where the next piece of this comes in, which is what I'm very good at for my old school style is, can you determine the size of the fish with your electronics before you start implementing these methods? Or while you're implementing them, can you determine the size of the fish? So what I usually say is within 2 hours of getting to the lake, maybe 3 hours, depending on how tough and how big the lake is and whatever, within 2 to 3 hours, I can determine which of these 4 methods is going to be the most effective. And I can usually determine the top end potential of that area. Are there a lot of 3 to 5 pounders in the area? And I do that with 2D sonar. I do that with live scope. I do that with side imaging. There's lots of tricks you can use to determine size of the fish. And I've also been recently putting an aqua-view camera on my boat, and I've been dropping the aqua-view a little bit to kind of see, validate what I'm seeing. And most of the time I would say I'm like 90% accurate on like, I think this is a 3 to 4 pounder. I drop the camera on it. It's a 3 to 4 pounder. So I'm using that as more of a validation piece because I already kind of know what I'm doing with that, but it helps still. But I can determine in 3 to 4 hours, 2 to 3 hours if a spot's good or a section of the lake is good. Well, for me in videos, I don't fish for 3-4 days to get one video. Like if I go to an area of the lake, I will go catch those fish, even if the top end potential is 13 pounds. Cause it took me 3 hours. Now I have 3 hours to go catch those fish, make a video, be done. But if you're in a tournament scenario, let's say you were practicing for an open and you had 4 days, 5 days, you might be able to check 2 areas per day with this method, spend 4 or 5 hours per area. You do that for 3-4 days, you could potentially determine which of these 4 techniques is working. And also you can determine a backup because a lot of times these plays are situational. Just like in football, maybe the first half you can run the ball, up the gut and just gash them for a bunch of yards. But then halftime, the team makes an adjustment and now you have to switch over and do some play action or whatever. So same thing happens with fishing. Sometimes those isolated offshore wolf packs, they're chasing bait are great for the first 4 hours of the morning. And then in the second half of the day, the offshore flipping turns on, or the schools start setting up better in the afternoon because the current starts flowing. And so it's all fluid and it's moving. But and I know there's a lot going on here and I get it. And fishing is complicated and I'm trying to make this as simple as I can. But the idea with all of this is that if you can pull these right levers or these right plays at the right time, you can find fish and catch fish on any section of the lake, any time of the year. You need to be using the right baits. You need to be doing the right thing. It's not like you can just go out there and just do this. I'm making it seem very straightforward, but it does work.
No, I've been smiling while you describe this. So I'm let's try to do this as an anonymously or innocuously as possible. I don't want to give away all the goods. But me and my buddy Austin, we're on a bit of a heater in the Thursday nighters. Okay. I think we fished 7 and we've won 6 of them. And we have a system. This is no BS. He and we both stand on the front deck I do number 1, offshore flipping. He focuses exclusively for 3 hours on number 4, isolated roamers. We stay in a portion of the lake that allows me, I know where the isolated structure is, and I flip a slow moving bait to it while he takes a scope and pans out. This is no joke. This is how it works. He gets 1 to 2 fish to commit a night and casts every 30 seconds. He's going, eat it, eat it, eat it. Oh, dang it. Nope, gone. Not sure that was a bass, but every Thursday he'll have one go. She got it, and it's a 4+.
Mm-hmm.
Every Thursday, I'll have 3 to 4 on the isolated flipping. I'll say, got it. And we either have to go in and get it. It breaks me off. I land it. It's a smaller keeper because that's not where the big ones are, or I catch a rogue big one in there. Yep. We're doing 1 and 4 exclusively. He's casting to 75 to 100 to get 1 to commit. And I'm making 40 to 50 offshore flips to get 1 to commit. And when you combine those two, it's 4 to 5 bites with 2 big bites a night. And it works like a freaking charm. It's exactly what you just described. Except the numbers are actually more realistic than 1 out of 10 biting it. It's like 1 out of 80, 1 out of 90. And we're doing that in 3 hours. So if you extrapolate that out to 8 hours, that's a sack of fish then.
Exactly. And the thing is like, for example, your lake that you're fishing, I don't know what it is. I'm not going to say, it doesn't matter. But maybe those isolated fish and those offshore flipping, that's great on that lake. But for example, I know my buddy Jimmy from the Bass Fishing Declassified YouTube channel that's Fish the Moment, or Fish the Moment, he's been crushing them around brush piles, but on offshore wolf packs, they're suspended around the bait fish, around the brush piles, and he's just seeing these isolated small wolf packs, and he's flipping a big Magnum spoon to him, and he's catching 20 to 25 pounds a night. And you'll catch 1 or 2 fish out of the brush piles, and then 1 or 2 fish on the wolf packs. So maybe it's the wolf pack and the offshore flipping. Maybe it's the schools of fish plus the offshore wolf packs, or plus the isolated. Kind of like what, I forget who it was. There was a couple of the guys who were doing this on Gunnersville when Wheeler won, but they were basically going around the ledges, and they weren't fishing for the schools. They're fishing for the suspended big ones, those isolated roamers, throwing jerk baits on them, and they were able to catch some good ones too. So it's this system, it works. The thing about it is that
I'm 100% behind it. It absolutely works. But every Thursday, we're very frustrated the entire night, and then at the end of the night, the statistical, whatever you want to call it, the statistics, we throw it as many. And here's what I did. I went out in my boat for a couple nights and I graphed. So I know the stretches where I can have 5 or 6 little stobs, brush piles, pieces of something underwater. So I know when I'm making my flips, he can just scan over, give me an idea of where it is. I'll sit there and flip off the right side of the boat while he fishes for roamers off the left side of the boat.
100%. And the thing is, it's, the probability, like we talked about, you might take you for your lake, it's 1 in 80 fish you cast at.
Yeah.
So in that case, you need to be casting at a lot of freaking fish to make that work. So you have to be around a lot of fish. And the thing about it to me is, or a couple of things with this. One, this system works really well if you can quickly determine which of these is working and if it's producing quality fish. And that is not easy to do. That takes a lot of experience and time on the water. So it's not like you can just take this system. Anyone can take it and just go do it. You still have to know how to use your electronics, how to use the live scope, how to graph for stuff, how to
what
set
you're
up on areas. It's a lot of stuff.
Present your bait correctly.
100%. So it's hard, and it's hard even though the system works. It's very consistent. I mean, I was out on Grand the other day. I had 1 fish straighten out my hook on a big worm, and I broke off another one. And I think both of them were 5+ just from the way they were pulling. And, this is Grand in August. And then I caught other fish on the isolated, the wolf packs chasing bait. I would have had like 18 pounds if I had landed those 2 fish in the brush, or, probably anywhere from like 16 to 20 pounds, depending on how big the fish were. But like, it works even in the toughest conditions on lakes that are heavily pressured, but it's a commitment. It's a full day thing. And the other thing I will say is that it is live. This system is live scope dependent. And I know there's a lot of drama right now about, should we ban live scope? Should we not ban live scope? I say of the drama, that some of the people that have worked Fish at the Moment and do work with Fish at the Moment, they they have very strong stances on live scope and things like that. And I don't necessarily, I don't really get in the drama. I just focus on the facts. I'm a, facts over feelings type person usually, and the probability and stuff like that. And what I've found is that live scope is very effective. It works really well, and it makes it easier for me to do my job, which is to find these fish. Now, it's not a cure-all. It doesn't make the fish jump in the boat for me, but it is very effective. And it's to the point now where everyone is getting exposed to it. Even if they don't have it, they're getting exposed to it. And I felt like it was my responsibility as a content creator, as an educator of fishing, to learn and to implement it into my system. Now, you can take 1 and 2, offshore flipping and schools of bass. You can take those first 2 and you can still go catch a pile of offshore fish without live scope. I can promise you that, because I've been doing it, and I have the receipts on my YouTube channel for 6 years where I literally never had live scope, and I was catching offshore fish in all of my videos with outdated electronics, using the waypoint method, using marker buoys, old school stuff. Those 2 pieces of information still are valid and viable, but you have to cover way more water. You're a lot more imprecise with your casting. There's a lot of things that just make it not as effective. So if you're going to compete in a tournament situation, or you're just trying to go out in an 8-hour day and just have as much fun as possible and catch as many fish as possible, this live scope system, the system, at least it includes live scope, my new system, is more consistent, more reliable, and you will catch more fish. And that's just a fact. And I don't think anyone will dispute that. If you don't want to do it, though, I mean, when I make my version 2 of my playbook, I'm going to separate it into, these are the ways you can do this without the live scope. If you want to, just know that the odds are not in your favor as much as they are if you have the live scope.
That's really good. The Offshore Fishing Playbook version 2, that'll be up on Fish the Moment.
Yeah, I'm still work in progress, Matt. I'm just kind of sharing it with you.
Is this the first time that you've really dove into the version 2?
I've ever talked about it. I'm gonna add a lot more of like which baits to throw when, water clarity, conditions. There's a lot more I throw into that. So it's gonna be more like tactical too, or when you take it out there, it's like, okay, if the fish are doing this or this or this or this, here's some suggestions on how to do it. So it's gonna be a pretty in-depth, detailed document once I finish it. I haven't gotten to that point yet. I'm just finalizing like
I'm impressed. I'm impressed. I really am. It's very functional. It's very functional. It puts a little framework around your day on the water, so you always feel like you're working towards or doing something instead of just randomly trying to figure out what's going on. It adds some structure to your day on the water. Well,
it helps. I think it helps kind of helps people realize that failure is part of fishing, because if you're really thinking about, like, the way I think about fishing is,
it's productive failure.
Yeah,
because you're eliminating.
If I fished 18 spots, it's not, man, these fish aren't biting. It's, ooh, I fished 18 spots. That means I have a really good chance in the next 2 spots I fish that I'm actually going to catch one. I think about it that way versus, man, I've gone 18 spots without catching a fish. I'm like, wow, the odds are probably that I'm going to run into one pretty soon.
Jonny Schultz, Deep Dive app, Fish the Moment, author of the Offshore Fishing Playbook versions 1 and very soon version 2. We're going to take our first break of the day. When we come back, we're going to dive. We're going to take a deep dive into deep dive. How's that sound?
Sounds great.
All right, BTL. We'll be back right after this.
The new Puma STS has been redesigned from the ground up. With the angler, design, function, and performance in mind, nothing on this new offering was compromised, and the only thing carried over from the previous version is the name. Based on the Soft Touch series hull that started with the flagship Jaguar, this new model is nimble and performs incredibly well at all speeds with either a 250 or 300 horsepower engine. Featuring a new 96-inch wide-body footprint, this hull measures out at 20 foot 7 inches in length. Industry-leading design coupled with tournament-winning performance. The Puma STS from Basscat. Feel the rush.
Everything you need, one legendary brand. Top one on Strike King.
Elite Series Pro Daryl Gleason here. My Pro Guide batteries keep me going on those long tournament days and long practice days. Always plenty of juice, never fail. The best part about Pro Guide batteries, it's the people behind the company. They have over 40 years experience in the battery business, keeping all of us fishermen out on the water longer, catching more fish. Check them out at ProGuideBatteries.com.
What's up, Bass Talk Live fans? Brandon Polnick here. And ever since I won a couple Bassmaster Elite Series events on Exxon Lures, I've been getting a bunch of questions of what makes them so special and different. And really, the truth is, it's in the details. The little details, things like no cheap fillers in their plastic. That gives you more lifelike action, more realistic and vibrant colors. But don't just take my word for it. Go to www.exxonlures.com and check them out for yourself.
Have you considered purchasing new electronics for your rig? The type of mounts you choose to protect your investment should be part of the decision-making process. No matter if you prefer 1, 2, or 3 graphs up front, Beatdown Outdoors has a solution for you. Adjustable, versatile, rigid, and made in the USA. What's your ultimate electronics setup? Check out the full selection of Beatdown Outdoors products by visiting beatdownoutdoors.com. All right, welcome back, BTL, talking with Jonny Schultz. Man, you put that in very understandable terms.
That's the goal. And actually, I did want to get back to one thing on the hover trolling. We kind of brushed over that. I did want to give you one thing on that because it's a pretty cool technique. And I know we mentioned Core Tackle. It's a company that Matt Steffen and I started together. And I wanted to tell a little quick story because there's been a couple of YouTube videos that came out from Milliken Fishing, and I wanted to talk about it because he's been throwing a little bit of shade at us at Core Tackle. And
don't get me in another deal with Milliken, man. We're cool now.
So basically, the timeline, he made a comment in one of his videos that basically Matt and I watched his YouTube video on the hover juggle, which is what he calls it, and then we made a jig head based on his video. Well, actually, Matt made a video on hover strolling April 15th, 2022. And Milliken made his first hover juggle video September 22nd, 2022. So Matt made his video, in the spring. Milliken made his in the fall. Matt's been on this hover strolling thing. There was an article he did for FLW magazine with this, or Major League Fishing, or whatever it was. There was a Major League Fishing magazine. There was an article with him with hover strolling. So Matt's been on this for a while, and we've been designing this hover rig basically since Matt put that video out last April. So we've been on this, and the deal with, just I wanted to set that record straight just because I don't want people to think that, what we're doing is some type of I don't know. I just want to put that out there. I'm not saying we invented hover strolling or anything. This technique's been around for years and years and years also. So that's the thing. We just designed the hover rig as a head that made it easier because Matt was complaining about losing 20 tungsten nail weights a day. And he was just getting really frustrated. And I was like, man, we should try to design something that could help you not lose so many nail weights. And that was all we did. That's what we came up with the hover rig. And I just wanted to, put that out there. But enough of the drama. I'm not a drama person, but I do like to keep the record straight.
You gotta stand up for yourself every now and then.
What's up?
So you gotta stand up for yourself every now and then.
Yeah, just a little bit, But anyway, so the idea with the hover strolling, and I really like actually Milliken's hover juggle rig, the way he sets it up, because he puts a lot of the weight into the head of the bait, which helps him fish it more like a Demiki rig, where that bait will fall faster to the fish. And he mentioned that our head doesn't really do that, which it's not supposed to do that. The way I fish the hover strolling technique is I will cast my bait out, I'll let it hit the water. And I'm going to, have you ever watched some of the Japanese guys who also hover stroll? They're working their rod and they just twitch their rod, twitch. And what that does, it causes that bait to rock side to side because that weight is distributed into the body of the bait. So that weight is in the body of the bait with a little bit of it in the head. And basically that bait will rock side to side instead of falling straight down. So you're not trying to get these fish to eat the bait as it falls. Everyone's like, oh, it kind of looks like a tube jig when it falls. And that does work. You can throw the hover rig and fish it kind of like a tube. It will spiral and fall down to the bottom, fish it like a Ned rig or whatever. But that's not really what I'm going for with this technique. I want that bait basically to rock side to side, and it rocks back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And that's what triggers the bites for me. I would say 80% of my hover rig fish that I catch, I'm throwing that hover rig out there I'm basically letting it sink down 2 to 5 feet. And then I'm just slowly twitching my rod, rocking that bait in place, trying to keep it above the level of the fish, and those fish will come up to eat it. So I'm not actually trying to let that bait get down to the level of the fish. The clearer the water, the further they'll come for it. So they'll come 30, 40 feet sometimes to come eat that bait. And they'll come out of 20 foot of the water to come shark that bait. So there's a lot of ways you can fish the hover rig too. You can also just fish it with a flat bait, let it glide and fall and move. And that's kind of how Matt does a lot of his fishing with it too. But for me, it's literally a cast that thing out, let it hit the water, and I'm twitching my rod and rocking that bait back and forth. And that's what get those fish to trigger on it.
Why do you think you cannot get a bait below the fish and get them to commit to it, even if they see it when it's above them? I've noticed it with the jerk bait, with basically any bait. It is really hard to get them. Like, here's why it's weird to me. You can get a spotted bass or a drop shot fish for a bait to go above them, shoot past them, and they'll freaking go straight to the bottom and eat it. They'll swim 20 feet down to the bottom to eat a bait. They're 5 foot under the surface.
Yep.
You take a bait that is primarily meant as a suspending bait. It starts above them. You know that they see it, but then as soon as it gets below them, they're donezo. I don't understand the difference why they'll follow a drop shot down or a Ned rig down and eat it off the bottom. But when you get a hover rig or a jerk bait below them, you're toast.
Okay, so I have a theory on this. I have a very strong working theory. This is not fact, so I'm not going to say this is fact, but this is what I've found. So I did this experiment where I was catching fish out of standing timber, and I was fishing a Neko rig, basically nail-weighted worm, whatever you want to call it, nail in one end. And I pitched that bait past those fish. And for whatever reason, when I had a really light nail weight, those fish would follow that bait for a second. They'd get a really good look at it, and they wouldn't follow it all the way down to the bottom. Once I put a heavier weight in it, though, and it followed fast enough to just stay out of their zone, they'd follow that thing all the way down to the bottom. You'd see them circle it, they pick it up off the bottom, and they eat it. Now, if you do the same thing with like a football jig in a brush pile, you can flip a football jig in a brush pile. If that fish is sitting 10 foot up in the brush and that jig falls past its face fast, it will swim down to the bottom, eat that thing off the bottom. And I think what these fish are trying to do is they're trying to ambush the bait against a hard surface. So there's two really good hard surfaces, the bottom of the lake and the surface of the lake. The bait fish can't swim any more out of the surface of the lake. That's a hard barrier for them. And the bottom is a hard barrier. So what I'm thinking is that when that bait's suspending and sitting there, just chilling in the middle of the water column, if that bait gets down below them, those fish don't want to have to chase that bait all the way down and around to the bottom. I feel like what they want to do is they want to try to pin that up against the surface of the water. And as you up jerk like a jerk bait, or you work a hover rig or a Demiki rig up, I think what those fish are trying to do is they're trying to chase that shad up, pin it up against the surface of the water and ambush it. But when that bait just stays there and stays there and stays there, it's not natural. I don't think
it takes a lot of energy to find the dang thing and catch it.
Correct. If they keep swimming straight, if they swim straight ahead, they can just keep swimming straight ahead forever. But if it starts going up towards the surface, they're like, oh, that's my opportunity. I can now pin it up against.
Okay, that makes sense as far as why you get a lot of crankbait bites when you're changing direction with your crankbait. Either you're cranking it down to where it's going fast, or how many times when you get that crankbait and you're bringing it back, are you like crank? Oh, there's one. It's because that fish thinks he's chasing it up to pin it up against the surface, or you're making a long cast with it so you can keep it on the bottom where it's on a hard bottom as long as it possibly can be. And those fish know that they can pin it down on the bottom.
So yeah,
that makes a lot of sense. I'm going to go with yes, that is a correct analysis, Johnny.
Okay. Well, then my thinking always is I want to figure out where the fish are in relation. And if they're closer to the bottom, I'm going to try to get them to feed on the bottom. If they're closer to the surface, I'm going to try to get them to feed on the surface. And that works in the winter time too. I mean, even when water temperatures are 42, 43 degrees, you can twitch a jerk bait and those fish will come out of 10, 15 feet up to a foot of water and come eat that thing basically off the surface. And I see that all the time. And I just don't think people think about that ambush element of fishing.
Yeah, that's...
I'm not saying I'm right. I'm just saying that's
I'm the more I think about it, the more I think you're right. You have it too hard, they want to pin it. That's why, I mean, like, I like to fish against where vertical and horizontal structure meet, which is often a man-made, which is a dock, which is concrete, which is something around a dam, something like that, because it A, provides ambush, and B, gives them something to pin it up against when you're throwing an eco rig and you're doing it. I mean, how many times do you see them come out and then go back in and nail it as it goes past where the vertical and horizontal structure meet?
I mean,
or on bridges where you have stuff. Yeah, where you're paralleling the bank, you're doing all sorts of stuff. And a lot of times those fish are, that's why a lot of times on your top water too, it's the first couple cranks because those fish are waiting because you have a backboard and a surface and a bottom. So you basically have an open box for those fish to nail. And there's only one way that bait has to come, and it's towards them.
Correct. Yep. Oh, let me throw one more thing at you, Matt, just because, I mean, why not?
Yeah.
Before you, so think about shadows. This is something I've been noticing with my brush piles, especially with live scope. I didn't know I was going to talk about this, but I'm going to make a video on this soon. I've been noticing that, especially later in the day, if you can cast your bait into the shadow of a brush pile, not in the brush pile itself, but think about where the sun angle is, and then think about where the shadow is going to get cast from that brush pile.
You can see it on side imaging.
Yeah. If you throw the bait in the shadow of that brush pile, wherever the sun angle is, and then think about like a dock where the shadow would be on a dock, but think about it on a brush pile. That's where you're going to get like 75% of your bites most days when you have that angle. So that's early in the morning, later in the day, midday when it's overhead. It doesn't really have that much of a shadow. It's kind of like right in the brush. But a lot of those fish will set up on the outside edges. And a lot of my better quality fish I've been catching later in the afternoons recently has been 20, 30 feet away from the brush pile, but it's because the sun angle's low and those fish are setting up in the shadow of that brush.
And we didn't realize that we were 20 or 30 feet from that brush pile for all those years that we were cranking it. We just assumed that we were right on the edge of it. And it's clean too, so you can get them in.
Yep.
I've noticed the best areas are if you have your big pile and then there's like a little stop just off to the side. That's the freaking nuts.
Oh yeah. For sure.
All right. We always have you on. We talk about the deep dive app. Okay. You have some more stuff that isn't out yet. This is the first look that we've gotten at it.
Correct. So this is brand new, hot off the press. This test build, we're still working through the kinks on some of it.
Yeah, I'm going to pull it up right now and see. Let's see if I can pull it up.
So let's just play it twice. We'll play it and I'll commentate, and then maybe just pull it full screen with you and me. There you go. Okay, let's play that. I'll commentate and we'll probably have to watch through it twice. So basically, this is give you context. This is a map of Grand Lake, and we create a tool where basically you can put a pointer on the lake, and it's going to analyze the characteristics of a specific spot and the area around it, and give you all of the areas that have the similar characteristics to that spot. So you're looking at the angles, the surrounding areas, the drop-offs, the depth changes around that area, section of the lake it's in, a lot of other factors I'm not going to get into because it's proprietary. But anyways, you can get these areas highlighted in the map. So like these are some offshore areas. So if you catch a fish on the spot, you can highlight it and say, show me other areas that are like this. Find similar areas. Let's say, for example, you're going to go fish a 45-degree chunk rock bank on Grand. Pretty good looking spot in the spring. So you click in here and you see that those 45-degree banks are highlighted. Well, you go around this upper part and there's no 45-degree banks really in that area. You go further down. This is where Jeremy Lawyer did really well in one of FLW Tour event. And basically you look through here, you can see there's only a little bit of 45-degree bank in both of these, not all over. And then the next pocket down looks like it should be steep and have 45-degree banks, but it doesn't. And you're wondering, why would one of these creeks be better than the other? Well, it has that 45-degree angle. There's other factors too we take into account. It's not just the angle of the bank, but that's just for simple terms. And basically what you can do is you can say, I caught a fish on this bank here. Show me similar areas that match it characteristically. And then you can now go run a pattern around the lake and just focus on those areas that have the same characteristics, basically.
Okay. So first thing that comes to my mind was the first time I saw this was, we'll go back to this in a second. The first time I saw something that looked similar to this would have been Hummingbird's Lake Master, where you're fishing and you catch a fish in 16 foot. Then you catch another fish in 14 foot. And you're like, well, I think they're all in 14 to 16. So you go in and you do your shading, where you do blue all around and you do 14 to 16, but it shows you absolutely everything in the lake in red that is between 14 and 16 foot. This is different than that?
It is. So basically, instead of just saying 14 to 16 feet, it says, okay, This is a 14 to 16 foot area. This is the slope of that area. So if you kind of look at just we give some basic stats. If you go back a little bit, when you highlight that area, it'll say, like, okay, this is a 9-degree slope on that exact spot. The distance to shore is 200 to 300 feet. It's in the mid-lake first half of the creek. And
so
then
everything else is 8 to 9. Everything else that's orange on here is in roughly 8-foot depth with a 9-degree slope, 200 to 300 yards from shore in the mid-lake area in the first half of creeks.
Correct. And there's some other stuff going on in the background, but that's how we analyze it. So it's cutting all of it down. So if you scroll around in the thing, you're not going to...
This is, I didn't realize this when we actually did kind of a pre-show meeting. I didn't realize this scope of this.
So it's not showing you all the stuff in the lower end. It's only showing it to you in the mid-lake.
Because it doesn't matter if it's 8 foot, if it's on a freaking flat that's in the back of a freaking cove.
Correct. And also, like, we can do things, and we're still in prototyping of this, but like we have water clarity maps for all these lakes. So like, for example, we could add water clarity to say, show me all these places that are in stained water or dirty water or clear water. So you can cut it by that. And there's all these other things we can cut it by. And we're still working through all these things. And the reason we wanted to show it on this, guys, is because we want to get feedback from all the viewers, all the listeners on the podcast, all the people watching on YouTube. And Matt, I think you're going to be putting a link down in the show notes.
Yes, there'll be a link in the YouTube description of this show and also in the iTunes description of this show.
Correct. So we want to put that survey out to you guys. If you can fill it out, I really appreciate it. And what it will do is help us determine, 1, do you guys want this? Do you think it would actually be helpful? 2, which lake should we be putting it on? And 3, the economics of it, how much you're willing to pay for it and things like that. Because obviously the more people are willing to pay for it, the fewer lakes we need to actually put in there to make it viable. And it's one of those things right now, if you guys understand a business, like, this is expensive to do and things like that. And so we want to create this cool technology, but without enough demand or the right price or whatever it is, we literally can't bring this out to market. So it's more of, we need your support to bring this to market.
Will you be able to tell like who filled it out, or is it just...
So we have a place you can put your email in if you want, but
put your email in if you want to put your email in. And if you fill this out by the end of September, how does that sound?
Sure. That's great.
The 1st of October, I'll get with Johnny, and if you put your email in for anybody who's filled that out, I'll give away a Denali Novus reel. How's that sound?
That sounds great.
Denali Novus reel right here.
Bam. Thank you,
I'll
Matt.
give that away for the 1st of October. So you have between, when is this going to air? September 12th and September 30th to fill it's like 6 questions, super basic, to help Johnny with the fish, with the deep dive app. Link in the YouTube description and on the iTunes description. Fill it out, put your email in, and then we'll send you a notification if we pick the email. But you have to fill it out and put your email in for the deep dive app to help this technology out.
I mean, honestly, like the cool part about this technology is that this is, again, we're just getting started with this. There's so much more we can even do with this. This is just kind of like our version 1 of it.
Yeah, but I would never fish that if I had caught something else over there. Now it's worth going over there because it has all the characteristics, and all you need is one of the little of the elements, the cover, the bait fish, and the fish in that section there. And now you basically have nondescript looking areas like that you would typically be going down the bank before going, I wonder why the hell that fish was there. That now you can be like, oh, that's why it was there. This is the bank that matches, even though I just fished 1.5 miles of bank that looked the same that didn't match. Or that's why I caught it off of this point and not off of these other 3 points.
Exactly. Like if you look around, I mean, when you go through that, like just example, I know this is just an example, but like there's a lot of points that aren't getting highlighted here. So it's like, it's like every point on the lake, we didn't want it to get to a point where it's like every single point is getting highlighted. That's not helpful to anybody. We want to highlight just a few key areas because you don't want to get to a point where there's like only like 2 areas showing up, obviously.
Right.
That doesn't help anyone either. So it's a fine balance, and I think we've struck it pretty well overall. And the idea with all of this is, again, to give you the ability to say, I caught a fish here. Because one thing, like in the deep dive app, we get a lot of suggestions on like past tournament results and tournament strategies and baits and areas and all kinds of stuff. But the easiest way to figure out how to catch more fish is to catch a fish and then just highlight the similar areas and then go fish those similar areas. If you can do that, it's a lot easier to go catch fish. And like, even I was looking at this, Matt, see this 45-degree bank here?
Yeah.
One thing that's interesting to me, would you ever think to throw a bait down the center of that cut there? It's highlighting both the banks, but then there's that little cut area in the right. Keep going down, and it's highlighted in yellow or orange. Keep going down, other way. Keep, you see, you're not, you can't even find it. Go to the left, and then go down, down there.
Right in the back of this thing.
That's the same slope as the 45-degree bank. You don't think that fish might be setting up right there and throw?
Oh no, I'm going to go down here, and then I'm going to cut across to go down around this point.
But have you? I'm going to
leave that.
I've seen so many things where I'm like, that could be the juice that I've never been fishing, and I'm like looking at this tool, it blows my mind all the time because I'm like, these similar areas are things where I'm like, oh, that's similar. It doesn't. We don't think it is because our brain doesn't process it that way. But if you take out your brain's processing and you just think about it, that's the area that could be like the juice, the thing that.
Well, I'm also thinking of like this little section, like right down in there.
Yeah, it's tiny little deal, but that might be a 1 or 2 cast deal where you catch a 5-pounder and then you move on.
Yep. This is, if people want to be pissed about something, it's this, not live scope. I mean,
so I want this to get banned before live scope gets banned, because then that means we have something that's really good. If this gets banned,
I say that in a positive, as a compliment, Johnny.
No, I know, yeah,
not as a negative at all.
That's the thing about this, like this tool, Matt. Think about this: if we had it for like grass flats out on the Tennessee River or something, or like the Great Lakes. We have like the Great Lakes. We could do the Great Lakes if people wanted that. We could do the Great Lakes. We haven't done it yet, but like, what if we went to Lake Ontario or St. Clair or whatever, and you could go and you click a spot and you say, find all the areas that are just like this, and you get those key little zones out there, and it takes the massive flat that's nothing and just shows you.
Yeah, I will say there's some that's like so featureless and stuff that this is going to be, this is perfect, in my opinion, for Carolinas, for Ozarks, for lakes like that, for TVA. It's perfect pretty much everywhere.
It works.
But dude, TVAs, Carolinas, and Ozarks are the 3 spots that come to my mind where Texas, you have a lot of very similar looking cover and bank. Like, you can't just look at it and say that's different.
Yep. And why are those fish in that area or this area? And it allows you to have that ability to flexibility to say, I only want to be looking in the back half of the creeks, mid-lake, this water clarity with this, this deal. And like, we're trying to figure out the whole, we're going to come up with like a user test group and stuff like that. If people actually respond to the survey positively and we get some good feedback on this, because the idea would be to get people testing this on a variety of lakes and then figuring out like, how do you customize this? Maybe it's like, okay, I don't really care if you show me first half creek, back half of creek, whatever, take that out. Just show me these types of areas everywhere. Or, maybe it's one of those things where it's like, show it to me across the entire lake, not just the lower end, mid, like upper end. And we can kind of, do things like that. There's so many ways we can adjust this. It's just right now we're doing the best we can off of kind of our initial guess is what I'm saying. But it's pretty incredible. Just like taking out in the lake. It feels like I'm cheating, to be honest, Matt. Like when I go out there, because it's like the fish, I catch a fish here, I pull up the app, I find some area, I go over there, there's fish on that spot, there's fish on this spot. Like, honestly, right here, Matt, this cove you're in, I'm giving up a spot on Grand for people. Right where that little highlight area is, I didn't do this just randomly. There are shell beds.
It's around Horse.
All 5 there's 5 areas there. Every single one of those has a shell bed on it right now that have fish on it. On Grand.
That you highlighted right there?
That's a spot I caught them on last Thursday. Those are shallow shell beds.
That's in Horse, isn't it?
Yeah, in Horse. Yeah.
That's bad that I know that.
Yeah, I know. But dude, it's fine. You know what's up. So, but there are go throw a crankbait on there. All of those spots have shell on them right now. And it's crazy because you highlight it up and it's like and even those other, like all the stuff that's highlighted here basically has like shallow shell beds on it right now in Horse.
Wow. We need to take another break so I can figure out what the heck we're going to talk about in the final segment. BTL with Jonny Schultz telling you exactly where to cast and why they're there. It's BTL. We'll be back right after this.
The great thing about the new Sensation soft plastics from Big Bite Baits, heavily scented, super soft, buoyant, comes in 7 great new shapes. I've got a couple of them of my signature series, the cliffhanger worm and the ramtail craw. Great for a flipping jig, football jig, swim jig, all that. Several other great shapes. Really excited about it. We've worked over the last year, catches fish all over the country, and I think it's going to catch fish for people everywhere you try it. The Spro Little John crankbait has been around for almost 15 years, and it is one of my go-to crankbaits whenever I need a fish in the boat, so you can never have enough new colors. That's why Spro's coming out with a handful of new colors, including Pearl Shad, which has this bleached out white look, but it's got this pearlescent, really pretty. We've got Copper Shad, which looks amazing in the water. It's got that purple flake on the back, really pops in the water. And then if you want some real pop, we've got Sparkle Shad, nothing but sparkles all over this thing. And then last but not least, we've got the matte Sexy Shad, just a really different looking color for a crankbait. So you want to give them a little different look, that matte Sexy Shad is definitely the one to go with. All these colors are available in the original Little John and the MD. I'm the kind of guy that never leaves the house without a pocket knife, and Gamakatsu's come out with the EDC series of knives. EDC stands for everyday carry, so whether you're on the water or off, you can always have it with you. The best thing about it to me is that assisted open feature. With this D2 blade, you've got it right here at your fingertips, so if you can't find your scissors, you need to cut a knot, you need to cut your braid, you've always got it. Make sure you check it out. Never leave home without your Gamakatsu EDC knife.
Born in Japan, using technology, innovation, and precision, Sunline produces the widest selection of fishing lines at the most technologically advanced line factory in the world. Manufactured at the strictest tolerances to produce victories at the highest levels of tournament bass fishing. From household names like Christie, Swindle, and Cruz, to young guns like Cook, Logan, New, and Welcher, they all trust Sunline to take them to the top of the leaderboard. Choose the line that will give you the strength to guarantee your confidence. Sunline.
Are you looking to install your own fishing electronics? The solution is the Bass Tank Power Harness. It takes the guesswork out of installation. No more voltage issues or interference. Designed by an engineer so that you can get professional results right there in your own garage. Installation done right with the help of the Bass Tank Power Harness. You can feel confident knowing that your installation was done right. The Bass Tank Power Harness. Give us a call or order yours today at thebasstank.com.
All right, welcome back. Wrapping things up here on BTL. I'm not going to lie. I say this every single time you're on. I've always been hesitant to bring apps into the BTL. I'm fairly protective. And Mark it goes back to Mark Jeffries for 19 years as far as sponsorships, because we work with a lot of the sponsors, have them on the show like we did here too. So instead of just a money grab, you could have it. So when you gave me the code for the deep dive app, I just went in and bought. It was like $80, paid with my credit card, the whole 9 yards, paid full price for it. And I use the thing a lot. It's on my phone. I've got all of it. It's updated. I've had a couple buddies that were like, well, you freaking got me. I wanted to see what it was all about. They use it. They're like, dude, it saved me 30 miles of running today because I was able to check, what was going on in a different part of the lake. And there's all sorts of, every time I log on, there's all sorts of new updates and changes and additions to it. So basically, if you want to know kind of an inside the mind of Jonny, not only the Fish the Moment YouTube stuff and the Bass Fishing Declassified, which you do with other BTL regular Matt Steffen and who else? The other you mentioned him.
And then we got Kyle Cortiana on there, Miles Berghoff.
He's an Oklahoma guy, Kyle Cortiana.
Matt's supposed cult leader, Randy.
Randy's on there, all sorts of stuff.
I heard that too.
Like a lot of the stuff you're hearing on today, like this stuff is implemented in this freaking app, and it's really cool because you can see it, the progress of it. So
Yeah.
I don't know. Did I do that justice?
Yeah, I appreciate it. I mean, we got really cool stuff in there. We, we have professional anglers collecting tournament data to actually back all of our recommendations in the app. We watch live streams from professional level tournaments to give suggestions and where to fish and stuff like that. We have updated water clarity maps in there where you can see the most up-to-date information about what the water clarity is doing on your lake, all kinds of cool stuff. And then we have this area analyzer that we're hoping to roll out as well that we think could be pretty cool. So just trying to continue to do that. I mean, Matt, between deep dive and then all the fish the moment videos and then trying to make these playbooks and all this stuff, I keep myself pretty busy, but I'm always trying to innovate, got core tackle going on, trying to innovate as much as we can. Cause I feel like a lot of times in the fishing industry, it's kind of like a copycat industry in a lot of senses. And I really like bringing in those fresh ideas, and not everything that I do works. Not everything that I do is maybe the most groundbreaking or whatever, but I'm at least trying to innovate the best I can. Yeah. And same thing with like guys like Matt Steffen, who works with me, does great stuff. Like we're trying to bring a little bit of fresh energy into the industry. And there's a lot of negativity going on in the industry. And I always try to focus on the positive side. Yeah. We love to fish. We want to get out there. We want to enjoy fishing, and people love fishing, even though fishing is one of the most frustrating pastimes you could ever get into, because you might go at 8 hours in the hot heat and not catch a single fish. We still go and do it because we love it. We love the challenge. We love figuring it all out. So I think focusing on what we have in common and our love for fishing is usually, in my case, the better approach to take. There are times when, other people have different opinions. And I mean, I think it takes all kinds. You guys know I work with multiple different people. Not everyone, I don't share the opinions of everybody, but I try to get along with everyone. And that's really my goal. So, I mean, not really much to say there. But.
My only beef with Matt Steffen is he is anti-Buc-ee's, and he is a Quick Trip with a K as far as the gas station. So like I said,
I have talked to him about that.
Yes, he's irrationally negative towards Buc-ee's, the convenience store, the greatest convenience store ever.
Dude, I agree with you on the Buc-ee's thing. I always, we plot out our trips to go to Buc-ee's whenever we have a chance. I have another bone to pick with Matt, actually. I'm going to do it live here on BTL. So I don't blame him too much, but the last day of that Mississippi River event.
Oh, is this Matt about the butt tag?
He won the tournament, but he was supposed to put tush. That's the ultimate swim bait hook. Tush. Mm-hmm. We got him sublimate. We got him like stickers. Okay, Matt's pulling this up. We got patches that literally are like a iron-on patch. His wife ironed on these tush patches onto his butt, and he was supposed to wear that on camera. It was a great publicity move, and he didn't pull through. So that was pretty disappointing, to be honest.
All right, so I had to wait for a recorded show to do this because this is going in the mail today. But it irks me that he's all about Quick Trip, where you can buy a ribeye next to a Snickers while you check out. It just doesn't sit well with me. It's a great gas station. I got nothing against it, but he has taken a stance against Buc-ee's, which is BUC-EE''S. So I'm gonna run this through with you. So I am going to change Matt's mind. So over the past time I went to Buc-ee's, I got a bag for Matt with the Buc-ee's. Here, we gotta go different on this. Let's go through some of this stuff. So he's got a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old. So of course we got the Buc-ee's coloring book. You gotta have the Buc-ee's barbecue sauce. We got the Buc-ee's barbecue sauce. What's a trip to Buc-ee's without some beaver nuggets? So we've got some beaver nuggets. And once you have beaver nuggets, you realize how good they smell. So we have the beaver nugget scented candle. Oh, that is just the rich notes of caramel in there is phenomenal. We're just getting started. I hope you don't have to get out of here on time. No, we've got the Buc-ee's keychain right there. To always remind them to have a great day.
Does it float? You could use that for the boat keys.
Oh, no, it's just a little plush. It's just a little Buc-ee's plush. So good. We've got some Buc-ee's Beaver Buddies animal crackers in the shape of Buc-ee the Beaver. We've got a Buc-ee's shot glass with the Buc-ee on one side. It says it's beaver time on the other side.
Matt, did you use all of your earnings from the opens this year to buy all of this Bucky stuff?
No, because that would require me having earnings in the opens, Johnny. We have a Bucky's koozie and camo. Then obviously a Bucky sticker, 2 Bucky stickers, one for each side of the BPT rig next year. What's a trip to Bucky's without a pecan log? There's the Bucky's pecan log. Crayons for the coloring book, obviously, for his youngsters. Now, these are the most underrated item in Bucky's. These are cotton candy mints. Bucky's cotton candy mints. Phenomenal. Bucky's cotton candy mints. I'm going to save the best for last year. Oh, here's a Bucky's Yukon Outfitters. This was the big money item here that I spent. But then we have some Bucky's Cosmic Pop Rocks, a Bucky's refrigerator magnet with tie-dye. I thought that, I mean, how do you miss that? A little bit of Bucky's lip gloss, couple caramel candies. Yeah, I had it all packed in the cup, so he didn't.
Wow.
And then just to really drive the point home, because I know Matt's a Bridgeford guy, and listen, I'm an equal opportunity beef jerky connoisseur, right? Like, I'll eat them all, including Bridgeford. Big fan of Bridgeford. Bridgeford has some of the best beef jerky out there. But Bucky's isn't bad either, so I'm throwing in some ghost pepper beef jerky, which I know will not be opened out of principle in the Steffen household. Maybe they can like donate that to like the needy. Although I'm not sure giving ghost pepper to a homeless person would be the smartest idea. I think you'd have to throw a beverage in with that instead of.
So what's the end game with this, Matt? What do you expect his reaction to be?
I just want him to acknowledge that Bucky's is a premier level gas station that deserves to be stopped. Listen, I've got shrimp wrapped jalapeno poppers and tenderloin, like all sorts of Bucky's frozen stuff out there too. Like, I'm a Bucky's fan. I took a little bit of an exception to his how strongly, and he never even been to a damn Bucky's.
See, what we need to do, Matt, is I need to do this with Matt, is get a core tackle trip down to like Lake Fork or something.
Yeah.
We swing through Bucky's on the way.
He would probably sit in the car.
No, he would love it, because I'd be like, Matt, I'll make sure I'll get a bunch of like Diet Coke in him or something. And you'll have to go to the bathroom. And you'll go into the bathroom at Bucky's and you'll be like, this is the nicest bathroom I've ever been to in my life.
It's like a small fort. Each can is like a small fort. F-O-R-T, completely walled in. Like, I mean, everything. It's immaculate.
I feel like I'm seeing a comparison between another colleague of mine. So Matt's never been to a Bucky's, but he hates it. Randy's never used Live Scope, but he hates it. So we need to.
Hey, Miles Berghoff and I are on the same page on this. I do need to give a shout out to Miles. I don't know if he's back from Alaska yet, but
I think he's still there.
He is. I wish you guys could smell the beaver
candle?
nugget, the beaver nugget gourmet can. I mean, so good.
I'm sure his wife's.
But yeah, Miles is a Bucky's connoisseur as well. No, I'm not sponsored by Bucky's. Yes, I am open to sponsorship for Bucky's. I'm sure that at least 20 guys have tried. There's no way that fewer than 20 guys have tried to court Bucky's for a corporate sponsorship.
I mean, I think like that's like a Lee Livesey. I feel like he'd be a really good Bucky's.
Or BTL. I mean, I travel.
Well, yeah, that's true.
BTL, I have a podcast. Fish the opens. I travel a ton. I mean, look, I just spent $150 just to prove to one of my buddies that Bucky's is the best in the business.
We need to share this clip with the PR department over at Bucky's right now.
We do. That would require me having someone who cuts clips out of the show and post them on social media, which I currently do not.
So, Matt, I got one more question for you. Do you have time? Because I have a question.
Yeah. No, we're all good.
Because I've been doing a lot of talking, and I want to get your opinion on something. So,
oh God.
This is my dilemma right now. I think of myself as a fishing instructor on YouTube. That's what I do. Is I teach people to fish and hopefully catch more fish. I don't fish tournaments or anything like that. So I want to get your perspective as a tournament angler, because I've just been out of the game for so long. I can't, I don't think I can give a really good opinion on it. But
okay.
Starting out now, let's say it's a high school kid or someone who's trying to make the Elite Series or something right now. Let's say they're 12 years old.
Okay.
And they have from their time they're 12, let's say they're 18, and for whatever reason they're in a financial position or whatever, they were able to go fish the opens at 18. And they have 6 years to learn how to fish. Do you think that it is a more effective approach for the younger generation now to just focus on using live scope 100%? I'm thinking guys like a Drew Gill is a great example. He's on Lake Eufaula in Oklahoma, and he's catching them in 6 inches of water visibility, live scoping them, and pitching at individual fish in like 4 foot of water, watching them swim on live scope and pitching his bait over to them. So he's in shallow water, muddy situations. He's mastering the live scope. There's live scope deep and shallow. Do you think that it would be more beneficial at this point in fishing to forego learning how to flip, skip docks, throw a crankbait down the bank, throw a spinnerbait, throw a swim jig? Don't do any of that. Give them a spinning rod, give them a couple baits to go fish on live scope, and spend 6 years just live scoping. Do you think they would have a better shot of making the Elite Series doing that versus trying to take the well-rounded approach of learning how to do everything?
No, I think you have to. Okay, so like in hockey, there's a lot of guys who are in the NHL who start their kids out with a straight stick. They don't have a curve in the stick. A stick makes it easier to lift it, to control the puck, to carry the puck. They want their kids to determine whether they're left or right-handed, to develop their backhand as well as their forehand, not to rely on the technology of the stick. I think what you just proved with the app that just blew my mind is that you have to have an understanding regardless of what the technology is. And in order to have an understanding, you have to have time on the water. And I think in order to have time on the water, and what time on the water does is it allows you to have an instinctual and natural feel for what is happening on the water. This is all hippie BS, but it's true. It really is. And I think that's hard to develop when you're relying on one piece. I think we're thinking, here's the assumption. This is what's happening now. We're saying these guys are catching them because of live scope. We're forgetting that 90% of these guys got to the Elite Series, got to the BPT without live scope. They won tournaments without live scope. They pattern fish. They found fish without live scope. This is the easy one out for the guys who aren't there, who think they should be there, to the guys who will never get there, who are complaining about going there. This is instead of saying, well, if I had the money, I'd be able to do the time, or if I didn't do this, now they're able to point to a piece of technology and say, this is why I'm getting beat. No, you're getting beat because there's someone who's spending more time on the water, that has a better understanding, that is able to get around the fish more, that has dedicated their lives to this. And this is a tool that they're using to maximize their fish catching potential. This has nothing to do with them sucking and then waking up one day and saying, I'm going to spend $30,000 on 5 live scopes and be good at it. That is an excuse that you're using. So that is a long, circuitous way around saying, do you ignore it? No. But you have to instill the fundamentals and treat fishing like every other sport and not just a one-dimensional game.
So let me play devil's advocate on that just real quick. So when you're using live scope, you still have to find fish. You still have to pattern fish. Regardless of whether you are using live scope or not, you're only going to catch fish on live scope if you find a way to figure out where the fish are.
No, you can't catch what's not there.
Correct. So even if you're using live scope, you have to find the 3 to 4 to 5 pound bass regardless. Live scope, though, gives you the ability to add a new dimension to your fishing. So in my mind, it's like saying, hey, if you're going to go fish off, let's say old school, new school. If you're thinking old school, it's like, hey, I'm just going to only flip, and I'm only ever going to flip, and I'm going to learn how to read water for flipping. And that's my one technique. Or I'm only going to learn the water for offshore cranking, David Fritz. I'm just going to go offshore crank. That's what I spend 90% of my time on. Now I'm going to dominate the offshore cranking events. With live scope now, though, live scope works all the time, everywhere, in all situations. We've seen it in Florida. We've seen it whatever. So if people can learn how to find and pattern fish with live scope. It's not like a flipping deal where when the flipping bite is on, it's not on. The live scope bite is on. I heard you say this on one of your podcasts recently. When the live scope bite, it's on all the time. There's no off season anymore with the live scope. Even guys are catching them off cypress trees with the perspective mode, flipping for sight fishing fish with the perspective live scope. So I guess my devil's advocate to this is live scope now such an integral tool where it's like, if it continues to be allowed, which I don't know what the case is there, I'm not going to give an opinion on that. I feel like you should learn how to find fish while using live scope and focus 100% on that potentially. I'm not saying this is what you should do, but I'm thinking that there is a case to be made that you actually have a better chance of succeeding. Because now, guys, too, we just have live scope now for the last 5 years. There's probably still more stuff to be untapped. There's a new live scope transducer, the saltwater transducer, that lets you see 400, 500 feet in front of the boat.
You're right. You're 100. You're not even playing devil's advocate. You're 100% right. Like it, and here's why you're right. Because part of the reason why a lot of guys aren't catching them is because their old school mentality is still playing into it, and it's taking away from 100% of scoping.
Yep.
And the guys who are 100% committed to scoping are able to compartmentalize or say this is a scope event. Like right now, you've got 50-50. So if it takes 100% or 90% to win an event, you got a lot of guys who are well-rounded who are only willing to put 50% into it because they're not going to throw away the last 2 decades of their time on the water. So you make a very valid point, but I still think you have to have an understanding. I still think you have to have an understanding and be well-rounded for it to work. Listen, you're still seeing the guys who won before the Alabama rig came out. There was a period where a bunch of schmucks won with the Alabama rig, and then all of a sudden it went right back to the guys who won before the Alabama rig that won. You've noticed that, haven't you?
Yep.
I think what you're seeing, and schmucks was probably a horrible term to use there. Guys who you typically don't have success. But you're seeing that with, I think you're going to see that with the live scope too, where you have the early adopters who go all in. But listen, Kyle Welcher was pretty damn good before live scope was around, and he won with it. Matt Steffen finished third. He caught 3 fish on live scope or forward facing sonar this past year. Three of his fish, he finished third in it. So I think you're obviously going to see a disproportionate amount of early adopters, but then you're still going to see your guys who catch them, just like the guys who caught them, your local sticks who caught them before the Alabama rig learned how to identify, and they're going to be able. That's because they have the natural instinct built in, and they have the time on the water, and they know how to make micro adjustments and adapt and not just stare at a screen. So the guys who don't have an understanding might have a short-term advantage in it. They might win a lot of tournaments now, but that's going to cycle back. That's going to, like you said, we're already seeing these fish adjust to the beam. You're talking about rocks, fish on piles, how close you can get, how close you can't get. That still takes skill when those fish adjust for you to make the adjustment. And the more understanding you have of the fishery, fish behavior, how it works, techniques, where to go, why to do it, what to do it, the more you're going to succeed. So that's why I think you still have to be well-rounded. You can't just exclusively rely on the technology, because then you don't have an understanding of how to make those adjustments.
To be fair, I 100% am aligned with your thoughts. Like, that's how I feel personally too. I just feel like maybe we're both biased because we grew up learning.
I know that's in the back of my head too, Johnny. Like, maybe it's a new world, and all you do have to have is this freaking box.
That's why I feel like that's why I wanted to play devil's advocate argument, because it's like, do I agree with what you're saying? 100%, but that's just because that's how I had to learn how to do it. And it almost feels like they should have to go through what I went.
I mean, what are the odds that Randy is that guy who's on the freaking late night radio going, the aliens are coming. The end of the world is here. I'm preaching it. I'm telling you guys, it's the beginning of the end. Everybody get on board with me. We have to save it. And then down the road, we're like, son of a gun, he was right. It's too late to freaking save it. The guy who looked like the crazy get off my lawn old guy was the guy who had it right all the way along.
Well, like, so
fisheries are decimated.
Oh, it could be
entire lure categories are no longer relevant. Like, there's been like 6 spinnerbaits sold in the past decade. It's like 2034. We're fishing with freaking goggles on. I mean, Matt, like, for me,
if you ask me, because there's a whole argument like the enjoyment side of it and all that stuff.
Yeah.
If you ask me I went through my whole thing at the beginning of this, where I went through like my framework using live scope, all that stuff. I feel like it's my obligation to do so as a content creator. So I have made myself go do that. My top 5 favorite fishing days this year, the most fun I've had, the days I look back, I'm like, man, I wish I could do that again. None of them involved live scope. One of them was on Grand Lake, where
that's Randy. You're screwed.
So one of them was on Grand Lake, where I had a mega bag of fish that I caught by graphing the fish, marking them with a waypoint. I stayed 120 feet away from them and was throwing a bait on them. And I never saw a single fish on live scope. I had the spot lock and the wind was blowing, so my boat was pointed the other way. And I called them without the live scope. And then the other days were like shallow water frog fishing, whatever, because that's how I grew up doing it. So for me, that's what I enjoy. But I think for a lot of these younger kids, and I say kids, I'm not even that old, but like I feel like they find the enjoyment in the live scope. And they're like, why would you want to go out there and not know what you're casting at and not know where the fish are and spend hours like guessing when you could just know? And I think that's the difference, is like we fell in love with fishing because during that thing where basically we had to go through that. We had to do the unknown. And that's why we fell in love with it. Where these kids now, they have the option to not have to go through that. They can just know. And it's like, to them, it's like, why wouldn't you just use it?
Yeah,
like,
but you went through the option where you could idle across a point and know if there's a brush pile on it. The generation before you didn't even do that. Correct. They're like, oh, of course Johnny's into it. And of course he's going to do all this stuff because he has to idle across the point twice and he knows if there's a brush pile on the whole point. Now, I had to grid the dang thing out. And then the generation before that was saying, oh yeah, well, I had to figure out if it was bottom hard or if there's a brush pile because I had to keep my eyes glued to a freaking flasher.
Yep.
To see if it jumped up.
The outlaw side imaging?
No, but
no.
Those discussions did exist.
Exactly.
At the time.
Yeah.
And like literally, I remember interviewing a dude named Rooster when I did my Lake Gunnersville documentary. And I've said this before. He'd tie a window weight, which is the weight that you do that closes and opens the window, to a rope, drag it behind the boat. And when the window weight was going, brrr, he's on a shell bed. And when the window weight went slack, it was a drop off. And when the window weight got hung, it was a brush pile.
I mean, so like I think it's just that difference. But I guess what I try to think about from my perspective is I don't want to get caught up on my emotions. Again, I'm facts over feelings guy. That's always been my thing. So it's like from a teaching perspective, is it actually a better teaching methodology to just use the live scope? If the live scope is going to be sticking around, I know not everyone has access to it right now. And that's another challenge because it's more of that's a whole other discussion. But if you're trying to teach people how to be the most effective in a competition or a tournament situation or whatever, maybe there's an argument to say, just start with live scope, learn live scope, use live scope.
I mean, listen, you're also teaching something that's going to be obsolete in a year or two because there's going to be no beaming. There's going to be no which way is your transducer facing. You're going to have 360 live. That is the next frontier that is coming. It's going to be 360 degrees around your boat. You're going to be able to cast in any direction and see your bait drop this whole, you're hitting them with the beam and how are you scoping and how far out are you? All that is going to be obsolete in a couple years. We're going to be sitting here going, remember when we had a 4-degree beam that we had to put it exactly on and we were like, ooh, we got our bait and the fish in the same beam. Like that. And I don't know this. I don't have any inside track on this, but it's pretty obvious that is the next natural progression in this. Would you agree with that?
I mean, you make the joke on the glasses. I 100% see in the future technology coming out within the next 10 years. And we've talked about some of this at deep dive. So like, this is something that I know is possible where you could put on glasses or you could hold up your phone or whatever you want to use for it. And you can just say, okay, there are the fish. And you look into the water. It's almost like you have X-ray vision to the fish. And that technology is possible. And is that really where I want fishing to go? Personally, no. But like, if that technology exists, you would be silly as a competitor to not use that technology if it was legal, because now it's like, you don't have to scope around. It's like, you don't use a trolling motor, you spot lock and you look at with your head and use cast. And now that's actually like kind of fish in the barrel stuff, but like it could get there.
it's going to get real sticky if they start doing this stuff, because you're going to have to ban 360 and then you're going to have to start looking at, I don't know. I will say this, and I think we've put a lid on it after this, because we could just go around in circles on this. Every other major sport has limitations on technology when it comes to standardizing the field.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean that Rory McIlroy still can't hit it 35 yards further than the average guy in the field, but it does mean that he's hitting the exact same golf ball in the exact same club 35 yards further.
Yep.
I am of the opinion, and I don't think I've ever stated this before, that it needs to be standardized in bass fishing. It is the Wild West right now when it comes to it, and I understand the benefits of the Wild West. But guess what? In order to make a civilized society with laws and rules, when the gold rush happened, the Wild West had to exist for people to go, hey, we can't have shootouts in the damn streets. We can't have brothels on every corner. We need to do some standardization of what is societally allowed and not. And then laws happened and everything happened and boom, we became a society. But before, that's what they mean when they say it was the Wild West. And right now we are in the Wild West of this technology. And it's only natural that it will become standardized and it will become limited in some shape, form, or fashion. And I think that's good.
Yeah, well, I'm grateful that I'm not on the other side of this where I'm fishing professionally. I'm very happy that I'm here on the content side.
Yeah.
It's a little bit less, I don't have to necessarily worry about it too much. I just kind of react based on what everyone else kind of does.
Am I out in left field on that? Does that not make sense?
I mean, so this thing, I'm very like, I don't know. There's all these slippery slope arguments. There's all these things of like, okay, if they ban that, they then ban there are other bait categories they need to go back and ban. Should they go back as it gets to a point where they come up with a glide bait that's so realistic or whatever that it just catches all the fish? So it's like, okay, then you ban that. And like once you start the banning, it can kind of get out of control too.
Listen, so I won't say who this was, but when Bass was going through the umbrella rig, their first version, this is roundabout. This might not be exactly how it went down, but this is how it went down behind the scenes. I won't say any names. Their first version where they said, this Trip was still running it. They said, this is what you can and can't use. Someone called them up and goes, Trip, you just banned a spinnerbait. And they were like, what? They said, based on this definition, you just banned a spinnerbait. And they're like, well, golly, I guess we did. We got to go back and tweak that. So I don't think it's going to be like a one version, one thing fits all. It's going to take a while.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. Fishing is pretty new sport too. You know, we always talk about that. It's not like it's been around that long. So there's going to be changes. And I don't know, personally, my thing is I think we should be always thinking about the average angler. That's how I always think about it. And I kind of lose sight of that at times because, you know, I focus on
what is the average
angler, but it's like thinking about people who go out and try to go, people just want to go out and try to catch more fish in the majority. And it's figuring out how do we find the balance there. And it's, I say out of all of that, there's other people, if you're going to watch other content about opinions, there's opinions. I'm not an opinion person. I just, I try to make cool stuff and try to figure out what to do with the rules and the information in place. So that's kind of I know I'm kind of getting opinionated on this. I'm just trying to get your opinion, Matt, because it's fun to hear.
Yeah, no, you do a great job. My opinion changes. One day I'll wake up, and the next day I'll wake up. I don't think there is a right, but I mean, I think there's a very healthy and unhealthy discussion going on about it right now.
Yeah, for sure.
And I'm not really sure why it decided to kick off right now either. That's the other thing. It was just like you woke up one day and everyone was just ticked off.
Dude, YouTube views. That's the root of all evil.
See, we know we didn't do this for YouTube views because we waited for an hour and 30 minutes in to talk about it. We would have led with it if it was strictly for the YouTube views.
For sure. Thanks for having me on that. Appreciate it.
I greatly appreciate it. That was awesome. Always a great talk. This has been another edition of BTL with Jonny Schultz. Stay tuned to BassZone.com for the schedule for the remainder of the week. Like I said, I'm on the road for the next couple weeks. busy schedule. I got the St. Jude Bass Classic, 2 Bassmaster Opens, and then another Bassmaster Open in Florida, all before the second week of October. So that's all we got for today. We'll talk to everybody later. See ya.